So I'm a little nervous. I feel like that guy who's come to a family reunion because his girlfriend that he is enamored with invited him, and he gets there and he like knows nobody and is very uncomfortable. But then gets to see some names that he's heard or talks with people, and I feel a part of the family because we have something that bonds us together. And so I want to thank Administrator Harp for inviting us, FISB, and you got lucky enough to have this pretty face come because I'm based here in Kansas City. And I hope that whenever I'm engaged in any type of work, small group or this type of effort or talking with people and that excitement, I really hope that as I walk away, people don't scratch their heads and say, what the heck was he here for, right? I want to bring value to that. And so it's been probably 10 years since we had any direct link through the mentorship of children with prisoners with children aspects, but we are here in this past year really been looking at how do we engage broader in that. So what I want to talk about is I'm going to give you an overview of our agency and kind of walk through those things. And I really hope that it starts a dialogue, and I'm going to treat this kind of like a discussion. I'm going to struggle a little bit because I'm one of those guys that likes to walk around with a mic, but since I have specific information to talk about and want to make sure that I provide to you, it's best if I sit still and look at my notes and look at the slide and make sure that I convene that to you. Otherwise, I'll get all Phil Donahue on you and walk through and start handshaking and things like that. So let's start at the beginning, right? Where we are, just to kind of give you essence into where we fit in this. And so we're part of the large structure of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. And as part of that, we are found under the Administration for Children and Families. And then that section there has various offices, the Office of Child Care, the Office of Head Start, the Office of Trafficking in Persons, those types of things. And then the Administration for Children, Youth, and Families. That agency is divided into two bureaus, which on the left, your left, is showing our matrix, our structure there. On the right is the Children's Bureau, and the Children's Bureau is children's welfare. So they're dealing with adoption, they're dealing with foster care, they're dealing with any services and programs that are infusing to help and promote safety, right, opportunities for growth for children. Then there's us, and we have some specific areas that we look at. We have the Division of Adolescent Support Development, and then we have Family Violence Prevention and Services Division. And you'll see under that that's where we have the Family Violence Prevention and Services programs. Under our area where I'm found, we break off again from RHY specific to also adolescent pregnancy prevention programs, which is all about, again, healthy relationships, dating, understanding that, those types of things. We're umbrellaed. Our whole efforts are in the space of families, youth, individuals, young adults, right? And we're all about, again, focused on how do we make sure that we live productive. We want to make sure that we're also focused on what are the positive alternatives, right? How do we look at this space? How do we use our experiences? We've all been adolescents, right? Some of us don't outgrow that adolescence for some time, and that's great. But we're looking at those experiential things, so then how do we infuse that into working and positively moving us forward? So our mission, it really boils down to the fact that we're here to ensure that our grantees, our programs are successful, right? For any of you that are in that program space where, right, you're getting funding, and you're under this law or regulation that says here's what the framework is, right? And then here's the money and go off and do great things, right? That's scary. And oftentimes we're viewed from the federal government, any monitors in the house, right? You're kind of viewed as that person that comes in, or auditors, right? To look and dig and see what's wrong. We're not really viewed as the support. We're just viewed as the person that provides the money. And any of us out here who has kids, teenagers, or college age, or even those who are grown, right? That's how they look at us sometimes, right? You're the money person, you're the resource person. But they don't really want information about how to use that right. And so that's really what we're about. We're doing that when we come out and engage with our grantees, when we train, when we look at programs, when we look at how things can do better and increasing, that spread. That's what our mission is about. Because once we give the money, we want to make sure that you're using that in the best way. And the bottom line is that the youth, those that you're there to serve, are getting exactly what they need to be productive and move forward. I love our vision. Our vision is, as you read it here, it really at the core, it's disregarding the fact that life's difficult, right? You may have heard, different sayings that we're all one paycheck away from whatever. And we're all one weather-related event, natural disaster away from whatever, right? So life is tenuous, and there's lots of things that we don't have control in. But in our vision statement, we're disregarding that and looking at the positive that we can as humans, as individuals within a community. Once we rally around something, there's strength in that, and we see that time and time again. And that's why I love our vision, because that's my personal outlook as well. We don't all come from great backgrounds. We may dress right? We may look good in front of people, but there's stuff that goes on with us that guides us, that's brought you to where you are today, that's doing the work that you're doing is because of those things. And maybe it's because you don't want those things to happen. Either way, the focus is on that positive that we can. We can, we will, and we want to. The end goal is to all have the opportunities to live productive lives, to be healthy, to be useful, right? To have a purpose. And it doesn't take, that's the difficult thing about it, it takes others to rally that piece around and get us to that point of recognizing the usefulness and the value that we have. So a couple of years ago, our former Associate Commissioner looked at our agency specific and wanted to establish and focus on moving us forward in some very concrete ways. And so he came up with building a stable foundation, and he created this stool that the RHY programs are founded on. And he picked these three things: accountability, sustainability, and collaboration. Essentially, accountability is a focus on how our grantees are doing and ensuring that the goals, the outcomes, the purpose and intent of our programs are being achieved. And where there are challenges, we're looking at how do we support that, right? How do we address those things? And it really means a focus from just doing, but really looking at why we're doing it and what the outcome is. We really want to move, and we have moved from numbers, right? We got to serve 150 kids. There were 2,000 nights of shelter that were given to a youth. We were able to get off 150, youth off the streets, reunite them back with their family. Those are all great things. But what we want to really focus on is, as a result of that work that we're doing, as a result of getting them off the street, as a result of getting them back home, we don't want that to be a revolving door. So we're not looking and addressing at the issues or the things that are occurring there or co-occurring, right? So the accountability piece of that has really been looking at how do we change? How do we look and include things like attitudes and beliefs, the behaviors, living conditions, in order to really better demonstrate the impact on the youth, right? How are we changing that youth's life? The sustainability piece is really, again, what I talked about earlier. It's us being supportive of our grantees. It's looking deeper into just giving them the money, but it's moving forward to how do we make sure that in doing this, you're going to be able to take this and grow the program, right? We all know how federal funds are, again, very tenuous, right? We have to wait for budgets. We're subject to congressional allocations. We're subject to the things that are on the forefront, whatever's the flavor of the day. And we're competing against all those things constantly. But despite all that, once you get those funds, we want to work with you to ensure that, how do you grow that? How do you look at stretching that dollar? How do you sustain what you're doing if and when the funds are no longer there from the federal perspective, from the federal side? And then collaboration. You may have heard the term federalism, and if you look it up in the dictionary, there's not always good things about that, because it seems like it's a controlling type of thing, that the federal government wants to get involved with everything. But in this context, the way that we're using it, the way that we're focused on it, is represented here today, right? Bringing us together, different people, different perspectives, different programs, different services, different resources, different backgrounds, skills, but we're all working towards a common goal. And we're addressing and looking at that from that perspective. So I'll talk a little bit more as we kind of go in there, as we go along, and hopefully paint that picture so you're understanding of it. But it's looking at not just locally, it's looking at nationally. It's looking at the things that are across the street, the others who are working in this space or serving the same population, or are areas where your population are congregating, right, and come through. And then how do we build on that? How do we strengthen that? How do we connect arms and make this work much better? And that might be faith-based initiatives, that might be other nonprofit or for-profit organizations. It might be other state funded things, other state resources, all those types of things. It's really about getting out a white sheet and just starting from scratch on identifying anyone and everyone who touches your population and looking at how do we engage them, educate them, make them aware, right? Bring them on board to collaborate and strengthen this process. So remember I started saying in the beginning how awkwardness and my feeling with this kind of family dynamics, right? That example I gave, and this is where we see. This is where you begin to see that we are alike. And if has there anybody done those DNA tests, Ancestry.com type of things? Okay, a couple, yeah. And I've really been surprised at how popular they've become, and there's all different types of these. And I liken this to that, and if you've seen the commercials, you know it's someone that does it, and then they put up the map of the world, right, and their dot connects all over the place. And that's really how I look at it in this regard. We're different, but yet when we sit down and talk about it, when we look about it, when we think about it, we are connected. And so even though I'm unfamiliar to you, you're unfamiliar to me, we are part of this family. We're second cousins, right? We're third cousins. We're that family that you talked about but never really saw, right? It's those types of things, but now we're coming together and we're recognizing that, and we're sharing in our same similarities. We're sharing our stories. We're building from that. And so really I kind of say all that to say that our birth is from the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act, right? That's where we came from. So that's how we are related. That's where we're born from. And from that, we had the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act, and then it was reauthorized in 2008. We've added to our portfolio the Act for Justice for Victims of Trafficking. We do a lot with that, as you can imagine, and are probably aware, right, that for youth, adolescents, this is a major, major risk factor when they're out on the streets, when they're unaccompanied, when they're engaging in other types of risky behaviors. They're very susceptible to this, and so it hits home with us and the programs that we have. The final rule, which really just kind of re-emphasized the act, it went back and readdressed some things, it clarified some things, and it focused, again, more on outcomes and making this not just a service, but a service that's going to have real impact and lifelong impact to it. So the RIE Act provides authority for three major programs: the Street Outreach Program, the Basic Center Program, the Transitional Living Program. The Street Outreach Program is our gateway service. That's our initial connection to those youth on the street. It is, as it speaks to, it's street outreach. So it provides funds to organizations to hire staff, train staff to be out and about in the community, to engage, to look and find, to support, provide immediate needs, and then to talk with them about and encourage them about getting off the street, informing them about resources, who can help, and those types of things. It also provides, aside from these things, it provides funds for research, and it provides funds for a communication system and a data collection system, and program monitoring and training for our grantees. And it also allows for, at times, us to have a demonstration project, if there are funds available, to focus, to do research and then see how a potential program element might work and be successful. So we have four core outcomes that we really focus on, and they're the well-being, their stable housing, education and employment, and permanent connections. They are, as they speak, right? Social, emotional well-being. It's talking about their own personal health, physical, psychological, mental, substance abuse, getting whole and getting healthy. The permanent connections is really about the experience of ongoing attachments. Again, it's looking beyond once we've touched them and once we've provided services. Now they're out there, right? How do we teach? How do we encourage them? How do we engage with them on how to develop and establish healthy relationships, whether that's with parents or guardian or other positive adults. And the safe and stable housing, again, is getting them into a safe and stable housing. That's phenomenal, isn't it? But not just that. It's not just getting them into an apartment if they're over the age of 16. It's not just getting them back home. It's really looking at, is the environment that they're going to safe? Is it stable? How do they recognize those things? How do they understand those things? How do they ensure that those things remain? So the Street Outreach Program, really, this was born more from the Violence Against Women Act. It's really, again, as I mentioned, it's an outreach. It's to prevent sexual abuse, exploitation, trafficking. It really is a grassroots type of effort. And so there's not a whole lot of structure to it. It's really just the need to get out there and educate and inform, not just community-wise, but when they come into contact with youth, establish relationships, bonding, and encourage them to come in right? Either return home and work with them through that process or come into a safer, stable environment. The Basic Center program is that's what our term is, but it's an emergency shelter. It is, the purpose and intent is to provide that immediate crisis intervention. So if a youth is a runaway, if they're homeless, right, if they've been kicked out or pushed out from their home for fear of violence, or perhaps for who they identify as, or for what they're doing, whether it's legal or illegal, they will get kicked out and have no place to go. If they're under the age of 18, then the Basic Center program can provide up to 21 days of emergency services. And again, it's crisis, so it's intervening in what the issues are, and its full outcome or goal, its primary goal, is reunification, where that's possible. So reunifying back with their family, with their parent, with their guardian, or another family member, or safe environment. That's the whole goal. The Transitional Living Program and the maternity group homes, they are a longer-term program. Their purpose and intent is, again, to teach life skills, to teach independence. The whole outcome, again, is to hope that when they're through that program, they're able to be self-sufficient, independent. We know that it doesn't happen like that. We provide up to 18 months of services so they can stay in the structured housing that we have. There's a lot of ongoing commitment and support by staff. They're working with them on either getting their GED completed, going to high school, getting a job, getting skills, preparing for that. Everything that, as you think about when you turned 18, right, or 16, 17, whatever that time was, on knowing and recognizing, I'm going to have to start earning an income, I'm going to have to start taking care of myself, all those things that you have to make decisions about is overwhelming. And if you didn't have somebody to do that for, then that can be even more so of a struggle, right? That's really what distinguishes our kids, the kids that you're seeing, that you're coming engaged with, the programs that you're providing with regard to the adolescents. That's really one of the biggest differences between them and us. See, I would guess that everybody here in this room has a Rolodex, mental or otherwise, of friends, good friends. Someone that if you're going home from work or out and about during a day, get a flat tire, it's raining, who are you going to call? You have that person. And if you're lucky enough, you probably have more than one person. But most of us have that one person who will drop everything, come out, middle of the night, cold, blizzardy, icy, whatever the conditions are. They're going to come out and help you, right? And they're going to do it without any expectation of repayment or being owed, right? They may joke about it. But, right, they're going to come out. They're not going to come out and say, hey, I just, got you somewhere, I need $20 for gas, or, those types of things. There's no conditions attached to it. Well, our kids, that's not their background. That's not their experiences. Everything that they've engaged with when it comes to adults there's been an expectation, something that they have to do to receive it, whether that's love and acceptance, right? Money, housing, food, education, any of those things. They don't have that. And if they do, it's very hard for them to connect with that because of other circumstances, right? So that's our core, right, is teaching that. And learning how to, as they engage, as we engage with them at the frontline level, to establish that relationship and mentoring and modeling that. Then it's looking at, when they get out, how do you do that? How do you make friends? How do you identify? I've talked with a lot of kids that struggle with that and who have also talked about how they've learned how to read people, how they get to see if there's someone they can trust. And we work with them on that. We actually work with them on what are those factors, right? How do you engage in communication? Those are essential Because, again, thinking back in your time of work and career, how many times have you gotten upset at your supervisor, right? And when we're younger, we don't have that filter sometimes, right? Maybe we don't have that filter when we're older either. I don't know. But it's a struggle. And with these kids, again, it goes back to what they've had before, what they've experienced before. And so maintaining that job, maintaining that apartment, having that relationship with that landlord, with their neighbors, all of those type of social dynamics have to be taught and trained and have to be learned and relearned, right? And giving of that time and effort is what our programs are there to do. So again, I want to bring us back to how we align our work. Oops, I think I went, there I go, seeking solutions, yeah. So I've touched on this. We're seeking solutions, to youth homelessness, seeking to youth solutions to juvenile delinquency, seeking solutions to, underage drinking or smoking, drugs, alcohol, truancy, all of those types of things, right, you're engaged in and working on. And really, we've got tons of research that tells us the first incidence of running away, which happens to be around 15. We've seen it younger than that, right? You probably can quote statistics on how early, issues of other types of behaviors, and I'm going blank, but, maybe smoking or maybe truancy is part of it, or shoplifting, or those, or other types of dynamics, right? But and so then it's how do we resolve that? How do we work on that? And again, going back to what our mission is, we provide a lot of technical assistance, a lot of training across these three legs: the accountability, sustainability, and collaboration. We're addressing with co-laborers, part of what we're doing today, reaching out, understanding who else is in the space, whether it's federal, leveraging those resources, combining that, looking at it and saying, what are the challenges that are in your state? What are the challenges that are going on? What are the barriers? And who do we know at the federal level that can maybe intercede on that? That's part of that federalism piece as well, leveraging those resources. Aligning our work. So you'll recognize this if, as part of the four core of the SAGs. And this is really the one that most closely aligns with our efforts. We are looking at, from the broader context, it is prevention wherever we're working, but really our work at the core is after the fact. We do very little on the prevention side. We're looking at addressing that here in the coming year to see how we bolster that process, because we know in engaging, we have community-based counseling services through our programs as well that meet with youth, that address those things. They go out to the schools and talk to youth about these issues, right? All of that's preventative in nature. But at the core of what we're doing, we're looking at arresting that continual problem, dysfunction, issue, and redirecting them to a more positive process. All right. I tried to find a nice picture of a pie. I thought, well, maybe not too good, because then you'll get too hungry and you'll be thinking of pie and you won't hear what I'm saying. So this kind of is just the best way that I could look at it as far as the resources and opportunities for partnership. It gives you that picture of putting that up, and really in thinking in the context of a pie. If you shop at Costco or other retail grocery stores or bakery places, right? You might see a pie that is, and I love these pies that have more than one flavor, right? It's not all apple or pumpkin or cheesecake, one flavor, right? Each slice is different and unique, but it makes up a pie. And that's how I like to look at this, right? I have one slice of that pie, but it's not just me in here, right? Our ingredients are different than your ingredients, but we're not a pie if we're not joined together, right? If we're not having one common goal. And as a pie, it nourishes you. It does nourish you, right? it feeds you, those types of things. So that's why I kind of look at that in that respect. And again, this diagram is just kind of showing who else is really that we know we're currently engaged with, that we have overlap with, Department of Education in regards to McKinney-Vento specifically, but there are other resources and programs that they do that touch the lives of our kids. The Housing and Urban Development with the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness, who created our homeless benchmarks, who we work closely with in identifying communities and infusing funds into that to end or at least address a major issue with homelessness. Obviously, juvenile justice, most of our kids cross lines with that. And so we need to know who you are, we need to know how you work, we need to know what's going on, what those challenges are. You need to know the same from us. And within that community, how can we, again, reach together and make a bigger impact instead of working on different ends of the candle. So you'll see, you probably can't see, yeah. So I just, in the center there is more of the state and local aspects, our research and awareness and education, and our homeless program services, our grantees specifically. That outer side is there's still more room at the table, right? There's still people that, and groups and organizations that we're not aware of or we're not too familiar with, but need to be here, right? That we need to talk with and get to know and understand. And this past couple of years, I've been working on this social engagement piece, our community engagement, because we recognize we've got a gap in our services when it comes to aftercare. Once we've done all this for the youth and we've provided all these things and they leave, we have a hard time in staying connected. We have a hard time in supporting that process of it. See, they get to know their caseworkers so well that when life happens and another issue comes up in a crisis, who do they call? They call John because John was always there in the middle of the night when they were in the program. Well, John has 5 new kids that he's working with, and that can be very taxing. Although John, as social workers and counselors are, right, we're gonna be there, and we're gonna help. But we wanted to look at how can the community engage in this piece of permanent connections. Again, kind of touching back to that community that you have, the friendships. It's looking to the community to engage that. And so we've started a pilot we just started a pilot this year. It'll start October 1 on a community engagement social capital pilot project for 2 years that's focused on the permanent connections piece. And we did a lot of research and looked at various models, and we came across some that had some great evidence to it that is about group mentorship. Again, meeting with the community and getting individuals involved in a youth's life to become that Rolodex for them, to support them and encourage them to move forward. Here's our resources, resources that you can access as well. National Clearinghouse has lots of research, white papers, information, data. Our training and technical assistance provider is the Runaway and Homeless Youth Training and Technical Assistance Center, RITEC. They provide the majority of our training to our grantees, but they're a contractor with us. And then the National Runaway Safe Line is a national hotline number where youth anywhere in the country can call or through social media connect with a live person and talk with them and work with them. And they have all our resources. And if they can find out where they're at, then they can point them in the right direction of here's an emergency shelter to go to, here's someone you can talk to, those types of things. And so it's a great resource for us. It's a huge impact to be able to, again, right, cover the whole land in that process. Well, I want to thank you again for this time, and specifically about the opportunity to kind of meet, talk with you, discuss with you. If you're an old Saturday Night Live person, you know, with John Lovitz, he always had that thing at the end, well, you know, get to know me, right? That's what I'm saying to you. Get to know me. You know, touch base with me. Let's see how we can work with this. Let's see where this goes from here. on how we can make those bridges and see how we can relate. And if we can't, if it's not the best, then you know someone, I know someone that we can connect to and somehow indirectly make this thing work.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick comment. On page 46 of your program, you will find the contents of your flash drive. And there's a section on multi-systems collaboration at the federal, state, and local level. We have the program fact sheets for the street outreach program, the basic center program, as well as the transitional living program. You can find out who the providers are that are already being funded by FISB within your state or in your location. Not only that, but you can find out how to apply for funding to create one of those programs in locations that they don't exist. And I think that connects back to the rural areas as well,
yes.
Right? So
Yep.
There are opportunities to apply, and those fact sheets provide great information on all of those programs and where to find the ones that are in your state or location.
Yep.
Thank
yeah,
you,
we
Aaron.
have programs in rural areas and metropolitan areas, in mini metropolitan areas. Yeah, we have them all over. And that list, it should be updated here probably in the next month. October 1, we start a new round of new awards that we just approved. So we have roughly 600, a little over 600 programs across about 315 organizations in all 50 states and territories, to include Guam and the Virgin Islands. And last year we have a new grantee in Sitka, Alaska, which is a little tiny island. So yeah, it is there, and we're available for that.
Any other questions? I wanted to also add, Rico Hall in our division, he is the lead partner coordinator for this relationship. We are also encouraging SAGs to invite representatives in your regions to come and sit and present this information, ask questions. There's a lot of different ways that we can partner. Back to that core protection, the institutional status offenders, great options.
Yeah, we have offices in 10 regions, and that's on our website as well that you can look. We've got staff in each of those regions as well that are our project officers and program specialists. So they'd be more than happy to talk with you.
Thanks so much.